Welcome to Out with Dan, the podcast that spotlights and examines the voices of LGBTQ+ authors, characters, and our allies. Together, we lift our voices and we tell our stories. I'm Dan White. Join me as I chat with this week's author. Hello and welcome back to Out with Dan. Today I'm excited to talk to the award-winning actress, screenwriter, and now novelist, Allie Walker. And we're going to talk about her latest book, or her book, The Light Runner. Welcome, Allie.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
It is wonderful to have you. So a lot of people will recognize you from things like Universal Soldier, Profiler, Protector, and maybe even where you got your start on Santa Barbara.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. A lot of different things over the years. Yeah.
Yes. And I did notice on your IMDb page, you mentioned A. Martinez, and I see that you have worked together more than one time.
Yeah, we did Santa Barbara together. I love A. He's such a great human being. I worked with him on Santa Barbara, and then I worked with him on Profiler. He played my love interest on Profiler, which was not bad. I think we may have done one other thing. Did we do, I think he was on Longmire as well. I didn't work with him, but he was on, or doing something with the show when I was there. I'm not sure. I think that was it, but yeah.
And I actually knew his dad in real life.
Oh, really?
Yes. His dad was a great fellow. And he used to come in the grocery store I worked in North Carolina, and he was so proud of his son. And it was always like, oh my God, he's the most handsome actor on the planet. And I'm like, oh,
he actually was.
Yes. Well, and that kind of support from a parent.
I shouldn't say was.
Oh, I agree with you, because I've enjoyed him on Dark Winds a lot.
Oh yeah. He and Zane. Zane's great too. Yeah, yes. They're great.
All right, so now we're finishing up with your movie and television career. So let's talk about your fabulous book, The Light Runner. So
do you want me to hold it up?
Of course. Ta-da! I love it. I love that. So will you give the audience an overview of what The Light Runner is about?
There's a young psychiatrist who's fresh out of her residency who's working at Bainbridge Psychiatric Hospital, and there's a very high-profile murder of a woman who works at a pharmaceutical company, and her husband happens to be running for Senate. And he, Captain Oliver Haskell, is a war hero, and he checks into the hospital because he's kind of coming undone. And but you start to realize after Ella starts to work with him that something else is at play, and you find that Ella starts dipping back into her past and realizing who she is, what she is, and how reality really works, and her patients kind of guide her along. And it begs the question, what is sanity? It's a psychological thriller. So you start realizing that the patients are almost like superheroes. They're the ones with the real answers, the real truths, and they're helping her, figure out who and what she is and what she can do in this world. And it addresses how, the world is being taken over by sort of these malignant, people like narcissists and antisocial personality disorders. And they really have no empathy for mankind. And so it's a way she fights this battle in a way to sort of hang on to her humanity. And, it just goes into so many things. It's hard for me to but on the face of it, it's a thriller. It's just a thriller, a psychological thriller. And it's a murder, and it gets solved, and there you have it.
There you go. I love it too. And so Allie and I were talking just before we started recording. There's a lot of what I would call almost New Age mysticism in this book as well. Mm-hmm. And I am a big believer in that. And I've shared this on the podcast before. I believe in past lives and current lives and future lives. And I love the fact that you wove this so seamlessly into this novel.
Yeah, well, my father was a physicist, and, I've always thought kind of differently. And I studied science in college and was a biochemist, and I was just doing grunt work in a lab. But certain things always fascinated me, like, for instance, time always fascinated me. And I didn't really understand it. And I didn't understand why it only went along one way, one vector, from the past. I thought, well, why can't it back up? Why can't it coil? And there were a lot of things that I just thought were kind of neat ideas. And I always thought I wasn't just, this wasn't the, you know how you have, it really started with my thinking about how I'd always had a very strong gut feeling about things. And sometimes it was right and sometimes it was wrong. And just kind of feeling things and knowing things and intuiting things. And then meeting people who are extremely sensitive and intuitive. And, you know, once you realize that there is more out there, you kind of go, well, why not? You know, why not? So yeah, I kind of go along for the ride and try to explain it scientifically in a way. So, which is kind of fun because I found out a few things that I postulated in the book. About 5 or 6 years later, physicists were describing as accurate. So I was kind of like,
Wow.
really? Yeah. And I mean, obviously they'd been studied for years and years, but I just thought, well, that's kind of cool. You know, that's kind of fun. So anything's possible, you know, if you can imagine it.
I think so too. And I also believe that humans are like animals. We run in a pack. I always liken the fact that you go in the grocery store and there's no one in line, but when you're ready to check out, the front is a mob scene. And that's because some human on aisle 3 and some human on aisle 10 and 12 all said, I got to go home now. And they all rushed to check out. And it's always that way because we humans feel each other.
Yeah. Well, it's like pheromones, you know, pheromones are the hormones that women feel between one another. And I think there's, you know, like I really am a big believer in frequency and vibration and things like that. And, you know, you get on the same frequency with some people and you just click. And I think we're operating off of much more of an intuitive gut sense than we realize most of the time. So some of it's just, you know, kind of whatever you want to believe or whatever fears you're having, you know, control you at that point. But sometimes, I don't know, a lot of it's pretty accurate.
I think so as well. So let's talk a little bit about Ella. So Ella is a psychiatrist at the beginning of the book. And I love the fact that she comes in and she says she doesn't believe in just constantly medicating people. And I agree with that analogy. You know, as I watched my parents age, my dad had an entire drawer full of pills. My mom was a fighter. She didn't believe in taking 27 pills a day. My dad, I think, was up to 18 a day. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like you're just pushing drugs on people. And because he had a fabulous health insurance plan, the company paid for it, you know? So it's like, and I think this book really explores so many facets of our society in a psychological thriller about what we do to other human beings, whether it's feed them with drugs or feed them with lies or bullshit or what have you.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I think, you know, the reason I wrote the book is I began to see so much narcissism in the world and so much selfishness and greed. And you know, we're seeing the fruits of that right now. We're living it. And it really is a lack of empathy for everyone else. You know, I did a documentary on foster care 20 years ago, more than 20, God, 26 years ago. And it was just, and I'm not like, oh, I'm so empathetic, but it was me and I saw a mother and her baby homeless, and I spent the day with them and, you know, tried to help them. And a lot of people do things like that. And I got to meet a lot of wonderful people. But by and large, I think we have, you know, we've lost the ability to care in many ways about other humans. And I don't think it's through any fault of our own. I think a lot of people on this planet feel very hopeless. You know, there are people in power that don't care at all. And, it should never really come to this. You know, it should never be accepted that it is, you know, you're always going to have people who can't make their way and everything. But in a civilized society, I mean, we shouldn't be denied healthcare. We shouldn't be denied education. You know, it's like there's a lack of empathy that is just pervasive in the world. And, you know, we're really seeing that now. So I started this about 15 years ago. Okay. And I'm just kind of like, wow, or, you know, no, wait, when did I start this? 2015. So it's 11 years ago. Sorry. And it's just really run rampant, you know, the lack of empathy.
Yes. And I think the lack of empathy is certainly what cuts the soul out of a nation and out of a human as well. You know, I've known for years that most humans care more for animals than they do for each other. I've seen it time and time again. You know, I see people step over unhoused people on the street. But yet, if a dog is in the street, they'll stop traffic to rescue the dog. It's nice to be able to rescue the dog. I'm not taking anything away from that. But yet, we don't have that kind of empathy that we should have. I mean, I know that that's the way I was raised, to be empathetic of people.
Oh yeah. I mean, that didn't, yeah, it's very sad. It's always gone on, but it's just, it's very sad to see the numbers of people just, I just really overlooked and really treated poorly, and just for whatever reason. And there's no need for it. I mean, there's no need for any of this. That's what drives me crazy. There's no need for any of it. There's no need for just a few to have everything. And there's no need for, no education. There's just, it doesn't need to be this way. And that's really what gets you kind of crazy. It's like, okay.
I totally agree with you. I totally agree. So I may have phrased this a little differently in a question ago, but what about the mental health system drew you to that, to figure that so much into this book?
I always like underdogs, I like playing them when I work, and I really liked, I like exploring mental health. I did something called Sons of Anarchy, and the character I played was really a sociopath. And I really enjoyed playing her. It was really fun to not have the, the annoying, conscience around whatever works for you. And I found it really fascinating playing her. I don't know. I've been in a business that's incredibly tough, and there are a lot of, wherever you have a lot of money, whether it's Wall Street or government or Hollywood, you have a lot of, I think, mentally kind of different people, and they're really intense and tough. And, so many artists are so great. But there's a lot of people, and they're saying now that most of the people who run these big corporations really qualify as psychopaths. And they have just had to be kind of cruel to get where they've gotten. And so I don't know, I just found the question really interesting. And I just started to explore different, cluster B disorders, which I found really fascinating. The narcissist, the antisocial, the histrionic, and the schizoids, and the character disorders. I find those really interesting. And I just started reading about it, and kind of educating myself, and, just kind of applying it to things around me. And it got a little scary there for a while. The border, like, wow. But yeah, so, I just thought it was interesting how everybody's reality is so shaped by what, obviously what perspective they're coming from. And if your mind is dealing, like, if if your left anterior insula has less gray matter, then you have less empathy, right? So, how that shapes how you see the world, and you don't see them as people with, problems and an inability to take care of themselves. You see them as a nuisance, you see them as something to be gotten rid of. So, reality is a very interesting proposition, and how we sort of collectively create our own reality. And you're watching that dissolve right now. Everybody's in their own reality, in their own individual sort of reality. And I think it's really hurting the greater reality of, the world. So
I agree with you. So you have one character that has a multiple personality disorder, or
Sebastian.
Yes, and I tell you, I loved Sebastian,
I
and
love
Malachi, and Nadine. Those are the three people
yeah.
there. And it's funny because, I think that in all of us, we have multiple personalities.
Yes.
I just think that with some people it's amplified. I'm not a fighter, I'm a flighter. That's my go-to. I just disappear, I go away. But if you make me fight, I'm going to fight. My Nadine comes out. If you force me in the corner.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've been able to play a lot of different characters, a lot of different ways. It's because I have a lot of versions of myself going on. And that's what was so fun about the book, is I felt like I was telling the truth all the time,
Yes.
and these characters became my best friends. I really enjoyed hanging out with them. It was really fun becoming them, So yeah, I loved it. I love that. I love, Sebastian, Malachi, and Nadine. Those they were great and just smarter than everybody. It was
Yes,
wonderful.
yes, and I think that I've watched. So I grew up in the South, as you were born in Tennessee. I was born next door in North Carolina, and
Uh-huh.
we locked our special needs people away. That was just what we did. But you would see them occasionally out and about.
Mhm.
If their caregiver took them out, and
Mhm.
I always was a little marveled by them because they lived in their own little world of what I might actually equate to make believe. I mean, I know that I was a creative child who made up worlds and stuff like that. And I think, maybe, and I think this is something the Light Runner does, is maybe their their educational levels higher than ours because
Yeah.
they see things we don't see.
Yeah. Well, that's what I said, proposed in the book, when Malachi is saying, about Dan, just because Dan is schizophrenic and he's constantly shouting at them, trying to warn them. And, Ella is sort of flustered. What do you mean warn? And he's, well, as a gift. And she says, well, what do you mean as a gift? And he says, because he can hear things that you can't. And he's trying to let you know what kind of danger you're in. And I just love that, I really do. Or, Otis is like, I hate liars. I just hate liars. And, I was kind of spectrum-y as a kid and had to, but I remember feeling like I just, I'd rather just tell the truth about what I really think of you and, what I really,
Well, you know,
and I,
and and I think the world is a safer place with that, as long as you're not unkind. But I think if you
yeah,
tell someone how you really feel, you cut through all the extra baggage and you get to the point.
yeah, they're very authentic. I think they're authentically who they are, and
Yes.
that's what my uncle was, mentally retarded. That's what his label was. And he was institutionalized most of his life. My aunt was, bipolar and she was institutionalized. So Mildred is my aunt and she's in the book, and I just always felt like no one, it's very hard to listen to someone who's on a totally different wavelength and
Yeah.
you don't have the ability to get in a way. And that's kind of what I wanted to do, was have Ella, through listening and through understanding, find herself,
And I love the fact that you included Maura in the book as well. So Maura has developmental dementia,
Mhm.
and but Maura comes through for Ella in this book. She
She
really does in so many different ways.
she really was the strong one there for Ella. She's the only form of love Ella had. And she and then you find that the dementia is actually just her seeing it all play out. And she's
Yeah.
just further away watching it and trying to find another, space for life, as she puts it. So yeah, that's based on my Aunt Nita, who is, my hero when I was a child. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's so I love the book because it deals with so many different health realities
Yeah.
that we all go through at different points. I will say that when Detective Moran was saying he was 62, I'm a year older, and I feel all those creaks that he has in his bones.
I am right there with you. I just felt I can't. I got plantar fasciitis now. I'm like, this is how it's going to be. My shoulder hurts. I'm just like, oh God, what's happening? I'm sorry.
Right. I mean, yesterday I opened.
It's the great undoing.
Right, it is, and it's like it's coming. So it's
Yeah.
just one of those things. Yesterday, I don't know, I opened the door knob and I got a sharp pain in my finger. I'm like, where did that? I've opened the door 100 times without pain. Where did
Yeah.
this come
I
from?
know it's going to start hitting now. It's like my grandfather said. Listen, just any day above ground is a good one.
I agree with Grandpa. I do indeed.
Gotta keep it in perspective.
Oh, wonderful. Allie, thank you so much for writing this book and for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm really glad you enjoyed the book.
I did indeed, and it's highly recommended.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of Out with Dan. You can find more information about this podcast and its host at OutWithDan.com, on Twitter at OutWithDan, and on Instagram and Facebook at GoOutWithDan. This podcast is hosted by Authors on the Air Global Radio Network, and the theme music is provided by bensound.com. Join us again soon for the next episode of Out with Dan.